We have a really good article here, short article I wanted to talk about from Jay Burden, The Enemy Gets a Vote, Group Dynamics in the Post-Kirk Era. This is something I also have been thinking about quite recently, and I wanted to add a few thoughts to what Jay Burden has said very elegantly here. First off, apologies on the light mode. I tried as I could, but I could not get Substack to show this in dark mode. I don't know what's wrong there. So apologies to your eyeballs trying to read this in light mode. Although a few weeks have passed, you no doubt remember the recent mass casualty event at the Latter-day Saints Church in Grand Blanc Township, Michigan. While I will leave a factual account of the events to others, almost immediately online discourse devolved into an argument over whether Mormons could be considered Christian even before the bodies of the slain were cold. This sort of behavior is not only counterproductive as a movement, but deeply distasteful. And if the right is going to function as a group, which is a necessary precursor to claiming political victories, it must be rooted out. For context, I am not a Mormon, and when running internal calculations, I do not see the LDS as the same as my religious community. The theological differences are very real, and Orthodox Christians have long held an understanding of the Trinity to be core to what it means to follow Christ. But an internal recognition of identity is only half of what makes a group or team. Sure, I may have my disagreements with Mormons or Catholics or even pagans, but let's not forget that we are part of the same group. The left views us all in one category: fascist. There are Catholic fascists, Orthodox fascists, and no shortage of Protestant fascists. I'm sure that most LDS congregants are fascists, and if not, are certainly far too close to a certain Austrian for comfort. Obviously, I am exaggerating to prove a point, but it is clear that all of these sects, or at least the vital parts of them, have been proscribed by the state as enemies and marked out for both official and unofficial persecution. The dynamic I wish to explore is perhaps best exemplified in racial terms. For example, the concept of white is tied up with the discovery and colonization of the New World. In the 14th century, it is unlikely that a Briton, Spaniard, or French person would have seen themselves as part of the same group. However, once you take those same three men to the shore of the Americas and set them against millions of savages, a new group is revealed. In this case, just as in our earlier discussion about religion, there are very real differences. These men may well come to blows over who is the rightful Duke of Burgundy, or if Philip II ought to be the ruler of the British Isles. But they are part of the same team in this context. The braves hiding in the woods are unlikely to halt their clubs to hear out a fascinating discussion on dynamic succession or cultural differences. These disparate groups are united from the outside, and I want to highlight that, from the outside. We are united from the outside. We'll come back to that. When we approach current politics with this same understanding, the reaction to the Grand Blanc shooting becomes clear for what it is: short-sighted. The left does not sort religious groups by creedal differences. There are aligned groups and enemies. The proscribed sects are all too conservative, too white, too male, or too fecund. In effect, the left views us as part of the same group, so we are, by default. This is what Jay Burden means when he says we are being united from the outside. We are being united because of the way that the left views us. The left views us as part of the same group, and so we are part of the same group, even if we don't like it, because our enemies are grouping us that way. Clearly, the enemy has a vote, but so do we. We have the latitude to determine how we operate within that group structure. Due to various factors, the right is often the more minor and reactive party within our current politics. Therefore, organization and, by extension, cooperation are vital. Does this erase the very real differences between the right coalition? Certainly not. But we must remember that the consequences for losing at politics have never been higher. Charlie Kirk, whom I would not have considered part of my group until recently, was shot and killed for his opinion. Similarly, Catholics, with whom I have very real doctrinal differences, have been targeted by a wave of trans violence. Even my own faith tradition was rocked by the savage attack at the Covenant School in Tennessee. Even if we take religion off the table, as in the example of poster Douglas Mackey or the current sitting president, it is clear that the consequences of losing are dire. So what is to be done? Well, first, show some grace to your fellow fascists. Understand that in the face of cultural, economic, or even physical assassination, intramural arguments must assume a subordinate role to the fight against the enemy. Similarly, using an attack on a broadly aligned group to score cheap points or gather online infamy is poor behavior that must be socially punished. In much the same way that talking about the results of a recent stool sample is legal but unlikely to help you win friends or influence people, social consequences can be leveraged to enforce social standards. In closing, remember that the left, the regime, or even the dreaded they have a vote when it comes to deciding teams. Given that we are in a weaker position, we cannot afford to alienate potential friends or allies over doctrinal differences that pale in comparison to our differences with the left. Okay, I have much that I agree with on this topic with Jay Burden, but I'm going to start with a disagreement, which is he says our differences, our doctrinal differences, pale in comparison to our differences with the left. I think this is sometimes untrue. Perhaps your doctrinal difference with a Mormon or a Muslim or a Hindu, for example, because Muslims and Hindus are not outside of this coalition. Like it or not, someone like Vivek Ramaswamy could also be included in this argument. It makes us slightly more uncomfortable there, but for the left, yeah, if we're going to make this, if we're going to leave this up to the left to decide, then yes, the left will get to put Vivek and whoever else they want into our camp. And once again, they get a vote. They get to do that, and they will try to attack you no matter what happens. So I agree 100% with Jay Burden that it doesn't even matter if your doctrinal differences are great or small. I wouldn't even say it matters how far you are from a Mormon or a Muslim and how that compares with how far you are from the left. It's the left who are going to assassinate you in this scenario. It's the left who have control over every university in this country and in every other Western country. It's the left who will create laws to make your way of life illegal. So it is the left who are our primary enemy. It is the left who pose the greatest threat. And that is why we have to consider how they will be grouping us, not just how we would like to group ourselves, right? But going back to the Mormon question, I do want to point out that it doesn't always have to be the purity spiral from the Christian, as we see it kind of framed here by Jay Burden. Let me show a tweet. This is one of the first tweets that many people saw after that shooting. It's a video of the church on fire, and Eric Daughtry here reports, breaking new aerial footage shows the church in Grand Blanc, Michigan, aggressively burning after being shot up by someone who targeted Christians. The assault on Christianity in America is real and must be stopped. 2 million views on this tweet. This is how many people originally saw this posted. And it's almost like a right-wing rallying cry around the assault on Christianity. That's literally how this is framed in this tweet. And then you could say this is unhelpful, but we have a reply here from Stella Maris that says, this is very sad, but it happened at a Mormon ward building, not at a Christian church. Unnecessary? Maybe, but not sectarian, not divisive. Saying it's still very sad. We're not happy that it happened at a Mormon church, but it's not at a Christian church. And then we have way more likes Mormons are Christians. It's literally in their name. Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, from Ricky Vaughn. This is how I saw this conversation play out online most of the time. I do not think what happened most of the time was that after this shooting, the Christians came and said, well, I don't care about that because they're not Christian, they're Mormons. What I saw was either on accident, the news framing this as an attack on Christianity, or on purpose from Mormons or maybe Mormon-friendly folks, the direct assault on what Christianity is. Mormons are Christians. And this is known. This is a long-standing argument between Christians and Mormons. Mormons claim Christianity and have claimed Christianity for a very long time. But what I'm trying to point out here is that this intramural debate didn't necessarily happen because the Christians were so strict about their definitions. It happened because the Mormons perhaps wanted to leverage this tragedy in order to help themselves gain legitimacy as a Christian, which, for take it or leave it, no Orthodox Protestant Christian is going to accept that. And so the bad behavior is on both sides. That's kind of what I wanted to point out here. The bad behavior doesn't necessarily happen from the North or the South. It could be anybody. It could be the sectarian, or it could be the purist who is opposing the sectarian, right? One of the issues with the right is that we are obsessed with the truth. We love the truth. And so when we see something like this happening, it's very difficult for right-wingers to kind of go along with what's politically necessary when they see it as an untruth, when they see it as siding with dishonesty. So we need to find a better way to unify than saying either we have to agree that Mormons are Christians or we have to fight and say Mormons are not Christians. We need to be able to not have that conversation right now. Right now is not the time for that conversation. They are shooting our schools. This shooting may not have been the best example because it's kind of hard to tell whether the shooter was a leftist or not, but the left shot Charlie Kirk and the left shot the Covenant School in Tennessee. And the left is in charge of almost every institution. Jay Burden is correct about that. Jay Burden is correct that we are in the weaker position. Given that we are in the weaker position, we cannot afford to alienate potential friends or allies. I think this is the thing that the right really needs to remember. It's sad, but even today, it seems like a lot of right-wingers cannot accept that we are in a weaker position. It seems incredible. The left has all the power and they see themselves as victims every single day, but the right has almost no power and really hates to see itself as being in a weaker position. But it's true. Jay Burden is absolutely correct about that. And the last point I wanted to touch on is his recommendation here at the end. He says we cannot allow this poor behavior, scoring cheap points. And I did want to point out, I think it was often the Mormons trying to score those cheap points, not the Christians. But either way, trying to score these cheap points at this time must not continue. It's divisive and it is antithetical to our political goals. However, I don't know that making it socially punished is going to work. He says, talking about your stool sample is a good example because that would, make you weird, make you socially outcast because nobody wants to hear that. You're a weirdo, and so you're not going to have any friends. And he uses that as an example to say that social consequences can be leveraged to enforce social standards. I think one of the problems is that the right don't care about social standards because the social standards have been the domain of the left for so long that nowadays the right have been trained to be contrarian. They're deeply contrarian. A huge, huge chunk of the online right are contrarian just out of personal disposition or out of fun. And so they're not very susceptible to social consequences. They're anonymous Twitter accounts. They are people who don't tell their friends and family what they really believe because they know the social consequences of being right wing. And I think that's why you see some of this bad behavior in our group. It's because we are the politically incorrect. We are the social outcasts. And it's hard to enforce social standards on people who've been trained to reject social standards. So we need to win. And then when we win, we can enforce our social standards. You can see this with what Trump is doing today with ICE, because Trump is enforcing something that is going to become the new standard. Breaking the immigration law is going to become actually illegal again. It wasn't really illegal during Biden or for a long time because they would just let them in. And we know now that many states would give them IDs, real ID, and not even have to put a name on it because that's how not illegal it was to be an illegal immigrant. But by cracking down, by using authority and force, you can recreate social standards. And that's what we need to do. But right now, when we don't have power, our loose coalition of right-wingers don't really have the ability to enforce social standards. So what we need to do is keep winning, and we need charismatic and influential leaders like Charlie Kirk was to unite us. Charlie Kirk was a great example of someone who could unite a large swath of the right while still maintaining his own autonomy and agency. We need more people like that. We need people who read these articles by Jay Bernin and others and stop infighting and focus on the greater goal, which is, of course, to defeat the left. That has to be our goal right now. That is the obvious enemy at the gates. And until we defeat that enemy, we are fools if we focus on anything else.